So let's take a look at how we can add materials to our different objects and how that then will influence the rendering. So I have the ground plane selected. I can go to Material, click New, and then you will see something like this. Maybe up here I could name this material, let's say Floor, and then under Surface I have, for example, a pull-down menu here. Currently it says Diffuse, and if I click it, I get a selection of different material types. Diffuse, as the name implies, is a matte surface. It has no reflection and it does not let light pass through. Glossy, as the name implies, is a reflective material, like chrome. Glass, well, it renders glass. The properties of glass is it is transparent, light can pass through it, but light will be bent, so it has a refraction value, and it has a slight surface reflection. Then we have translucent, which is kind of like a translucent material, which means light can go into the volume and illuminate it, but it's not transparent. And then we have transparent, and that is not necessarily a physically correct material, but it's a cheap way to render something that needs to be transparent. For example, transparent like glass can light pass through it, but it has no light bending property and it also does not have a surface reflection. But if you need something to be transparent, but you don't need light to be bent, it can be a faster way to render than using the glass shader. Then we have velvet, well, for velvet fabric, and we have emission. Emission is used to make something illuminate light. For the diffuse, we have the properties of color and roughness. And with color, maybe if you click on it, we can set it maybe to a medium gray. Then let's select the sphere. We can keep it at diffuse, but maybe for this one, we give it a color. And then I'm going to select this top light, click New. I say emission. Maybe I call this one top light. And then besides the color, so you can have lots of light and no light, black, no light. And of course, you can have different colors for the light as well. Keep in mind that, for example, artificial light is slightly bluish, so maybe tint of this. And if you want to have a warm light, maybe like sunlight, tint of that. And you can be really gentle here with the color selections because it will really quite quickly start tinting your rendering. And then, well, the strength, of course, that defines how strong the light is, how much light is being emitted into the scene. Now to see something, we can switch the viewport shading to material. And that, for example, then will show you the colors of your objects. You can see if I scroll through here, I always see the different shade. It's more like a good preview of the color of that material. And then to have a photorealistic rendering, we can switch the viewport shading to rendered. And there you see now the area light is emitting light down onto the sphere. So the sphere is being illuminated on the top, and then it creates this nice and soft shadow below it. If I, for example, move this light up, the light is further away and less light will hit the sphere. And if I move it closer to the object, more light will hit that area and make it brighter. But at the same time, you also see the shadow below, for example, gets softer because light from all the sides can reach the space below the sphere and actually make the shadow brightened up so you don't actually see the shadow. And if I move this area light further away, less rays can hit the space below, and the shadow will be more visible. So you see that, for example, can be the impact by just moving the lights left and right. Here now I have the light on the left side, so only the left part of the sphere is being lit, or the right side. So let's reposition this one quickly. And also, maybe you don't really want to see that area light. To turn this one off, we could go to Object, and inside Ray Visibility, deactivate camera. Then the light will still be there, so you see it illuminates my scene, but it just doesn't show up inside my rendering. Now I can freely move it around, and I don't really have to worry too much about that this one might be visible inside my camera. If I now turn the light to 0, you see that there is still a little bit of reflection, light inside my environment. And if you go to the world, you see that here I have a background and a color and a strength of 1. So maybe set this one to white. See, it's wider. If I set this to 0, my whole scene is dark. So this, for example, is the background light. So think about it like a sphere that is surrounding your scene and just emitting light into your environment. And as you can see, it's very diffuse. It does not create any contrast or so. And it can be used to, for example, simulate indirect lighting or to brighten up your scene everywhere just a notch. Maybe that sounds a little bit confusing. So let's go back to Google and let's go to this image here. What's interesting about this is that you can see the roof and the black walls. And you can notice that actually no light is really pointing at those walls, but you can still see light there. So what's happening is that those lights emit direct light. They hit, for example, the ground plane, and then the light rays bounce off into all directions and turn into diffuse light. And that diffuse light, when it hits, for example, the drapes, makes it visible because light hits it and thus illuminates it. A different example is if you're inside a room during a day, the sunlight does not hit your window, there's still light inside your room. And that is because indirect light, so diffuse light rays, are entering the room through the window, bouncing off the walls, and this way making your room lit. So you have two types of lights: environment or indirect light, and then the direct light that goes directly emitted from a light object. And that can actually be creatively very useful for a rendering, because pure black and pure white is something you don't have. So for example, for reflections, you should always have a little bit of dark gray, but not black inside your scene. And to maybe showcase this, let's go ahead and model a little bit this backdrop. So I'm just going and add a very small rounded corner down here, kind of like this. Then I shade this one smooth, okay. And then I turn my area light back on. So on the one side, you see with the backdrop, I'm blocking my background color, but then from the side, the light still can actually emit into my scene. Now this currently is a diffuse object, So let's duplicate it and move it to there. And then I'm going to create a new material. And let's say I call this one Chrome. And select Glossy. Now you can see that inside the reflection it shows the blue ball, the grayish ground plane, my area light, and that grayish, bright grayish environment of my, or color of my environment. Now if I set this one to 0, the reflection is pitch black. It's a high contrast, but we don't really have, as I mentioned, true black. So we have to brighten this up a little bit. And if I type in 0.1, you can start seeing this a little bit. And it's maybe a little bit too much, so 0.05 is maybe not bad. Maybe still a little bit too strong. So you can play with those values a little bit. So this is nearly black, but it's not 100% black. So that's, for example, what in the studio environment this world material can be used for. And let's make one more material, and I move this one over to here. Let's remove it, add a new material. Let's say we call this one glass. And there you can see that it reflects the grayish color of my backdrop. So if I select my background and maybe make it green, you can see that the light passes through it, so I see the color of my backdrop through the glass object. And if I select my sphere and set it to transparent, I can basically see through the object, but as you have noticed, there's no light bending, and also there's no reflection on that material, in contrast to, for example, if I use glass. And then I also have, for example, a roughness for the glass that basically could make the glass sandblasted. So if I type in 0.5, you see that it is very, very diffused. I also have an index of reflection that changes the amount of light bending or how strong the light is bent. So you see 0.15 bends the light a little bit, and when I go higher, it bends it more. A value of 1.45 is quite common for glass. If I now go to the chrome, I only have a roughness. I don't have an index of reflection because chrome doesn't let light pass. But with the roughness, for example, I can make that reflection somewhat diffused. So this way, for example, I could simulate, let's say, a sandblasted aluminum part. Or maybe I would like to have it anodized, then I could also give it a color like this. So you see, with only changing few properties, I can quickly simulate different types of materials from like this anodized chrome to maybe polished stainless steel, which has totally sharp reflection. And let's set this one back to this color. We can make this one a little bit brighter or neutral like this. Okay,